Welcome to the Livin'Sky podcast, a show about raising connected, resilient kids in a world that often forgets what they need most. I'm Livin'Sky, a pediatric speech-language pathologist, holistic feeding specialist, and a mom, here to help you understand your child's body, behavior, and biology in a whole new way. Each episode brings you simple, practical tools to support healthy eating, development, and family connection without the overwhelm. Thanks for listening. I'm so glad you're here. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Livin'Sky podcast, your go-to source for healthy living and valuable insights into child development and family health. I'm your host, Paulina Livin'Sky, or Lina for short. As an SLP specializing in feeding, and most importantly, a mom, my work in holistic health reflects both my professional experience and personal journey. For over a decade, I've passionately studied and researched this field. Now I work with parents of children with chronic disorders, helping them heal and thrive. Join me for a mix of solo and guest episodes featuring experts in the health and wellness space. I can't wait to dive in, and also, I have a toddler, so I gotta get going. Let's get the show on the road. Welcome to the Livin'Sky podcast. Hello, I am thrilled to be back for season 2. I took a bit of a break from recording, and I'm going to explain in a minute why. But I'm so excited to be back with a very fresh perspective on things because we are always learning, always healing, and always kind of humbled. What I learned over the last few months and what I've really been leaning more towards over the last year or so in general is being back to basics or living a more basic life. It's what really works for most people. I just feel like things are overcomplicated in today's world. There are just so many different diet perspectives and so many different lifestyle things that are being pushed on us, and so many different lessons to be learned and spiritual healing tools. And it's just the oversaturation and the noise of social media and the noise in the world in general can be overwhelming when you're trying to heal from something. And I've had a chronic condition since I was a child. You kind of get pushed towards different healing modalities. And every single time you go through one, hopefully, well, first of all, it helps you. But if it doesn't, you learn some lessons of what works and what doesn't work for your body. But what I do find is that it can be very overwhelming to be in this space of healing. So what I've learned over the last really year or so, what I'm leaning more towards and what life lessons are bringing me, what knowledge I'm gaining is that the more you go back to basics, meaning eating foods that our ancestors ate and being more in nature and just looking inwards, these basic things are exactly what most of us need. It's kind of like tuning out from all the noise to learn these beautiful lessons is so important. We're just so overstimulated. We're overstimulated to a point where we can't hear our internal voice anymore. And that's very worrisome. So I implore you to do the same. Just look within, tune out the outside world, and let nature do its job. And I can guarantee you're going to feel so much better when you do that. Okay, but I digress. So I took a break from the podcast because I had mold toxicity. I was exposed to a very toxic mold environment back in August of 2024. And what followed was just a plethora of symptoms. There were so many symptoms that I had that made me feel so sick and made me honestly scared for my life because I thought, well, these symptoms are so severe and so scary that perhaps, I have cancer or something really bad is happening with me neurologically. That I ended up having to take a step back and again, listen to my body and let nature help me to feel better, to heal. And I'm happy to report at the time of recording this episode in March of 2025, I feel a million times better. it is just a completely different life compared to where I was back in August. It was very scary. Although I didn't really get symptoms in August, they really started more in like September. So it wasn't immediately after the mold exposure, but like 2-3 weeks after. So yeah, there is a lot of talk about mold. There is a lot of talk about how toxic it can be and how bad it can be for your health. So I wanted to do an episode about it today, to talk about my symptoms, what I did to feel better, and some signs that perhaps you or your loved one is struggling or are being exposed to mold toxicity at this time. So yeah, back in August, I ended up going to California and I was very excited. I went for a conference. I went to the VCon conference. I'm a big fan of Gary Vaynerchuk, and I do have some of the VFriends NFTs. It was my first conference because the last two, this was the third one. The last two, I was either pregnant or nursing, and I just didn't really want to deal with going to a conference at that time. But this year it was different, or last year now. So I ended up going, and I ended up booking this Airbnb, which had 5-star reviews. It looked really great on the Airbnb website. And I was excited because my whole family was coming. My parents went with us, my son, my husband, my mother-in-law. So it was going to turn into not only the conference, but also like a very nice family vacation. They've never been to California. I'm a big fan of California. I love being there. So I was excited. When we got there, the Airbnb was okay. I mean, it was nothing like the pictures. It was a little bit more rundown, but it was kind of very stuffy. First of all, the AC wasn't working, so that was an ongoing issue we had with the host. Based on our conversations, I have a feeling it was broken before we got there, and he kind of knew, but he just didn't do anything to fix it, which I'm not really sure why, but hey, that's what happened. So it didn't get fixed during our stay. We were there for a week, but luckily, as many of us know, California weather is amazing. So in August, it was nice and breezy during the days and at nights. So it wasn't so bad. Like we could deal without the AC. But there was still this stuffiness in the house. And when I went to open some windows, they were just like very, very dirty. But it wasn't just like regular dirt. It just felt like in hindsight, what I think it was mold. But I didn't think about that at that point. Also, the place was very dusty. It was just not in a good shape. So my mom, who's a little bit OCD when it comes to cleanliness, she ended up helping us clean, and I helped out as well, but more because I was gone for the conference in the first 3 days, like she really dusted and helped us clean the house. But there was still this like unfresh air in the house and this moisture, you know? And I didn't think much about it at the time. I was just like, okay, well, we already paid for this. And I was already in the talks with the host who was saying he was trying to fix the AC. I didn't want to, make a big deal about it. So we ended up staying in the place. And I really wish we had left just because of the mold, but I really didn't know about it. So we ended up staying there for the whole week. And then I ended up going to San Diego for a few days, and we stayed in a much nicer Airbnb, which didn't have any mold issues. So that was a nice break. But then we came home, and after about 2-3 weeks, I started having all these symptoms. So there were many, and they were very unusual. So the first thing that I noticed is that I was getting up to pee 2-3 times at night. I usually get up to pee like once. This is just something that usually happens to me, but it was just so much. Sometimes even 4 times at night. I was just peeing a ton. And I was like, well, this is unusual. This is kind of weird. And then came the dizziness spells, especially if I was on the screens. If I was on computer, if I was watching TV, I would get dizzy. Then I also ended up having vertigo. So if I moved my head too fast, like let's say I was facing the kitchen sink and I wanted to turn towards the pantry or something, I ended up having like a dizzy spell or like vertigo, like everything, like my picture started to shift. And after like a few seconds, it normalized. But I have never dealt with that before. Another thing that was happening to me is I was having this base of tongue tightness. It kind of really felt like a ball was stuck under my tongue. So every time I went to like touch the base of my tongue with my tongue, right, I would kind of like curl it down. It just felt like I had like a ping pong ball under my tongue. It was very scary, honestly. And then I also had swallowing issues. And I'm a speech language pathologist, so I work very closely with swallowing. So that was especially worrisome to me because that points towards some kind of growth or neurological issue. So that really scared me. But essentially, most of the time when I ate, I would feel like food was stuck after in my throat after I swallowed. So like I wasn't clearing the food all the way. There was still some food left over. So at that point, I was very nervous. Like I said before, I was thinking, well, maybe it's cancer, maybe it's this, maybe it's some kind of neurological issue. So I ended up going to an ENT, and I had an endoscopy of the throat, right? So I asked him to scope me to see if there's any signs of disorder of disease or any type of functional issues. And after I had that scope done, that imaging done, it made me feel a little bit better because then I knew, okay, well, there's really nothing there that's functionally wrong. So what is going on? Right? So that's when my wheels started to turn, like, what is really causing all of this? I had more issues though. I also had some bleeding gums. So every time I brushed my teeth, I would get excessive bleeding. And I didn't have that issue before, only during pregnancy. But I wasn't pregnant. So I was like, okay, well, this is very weird. My hair started falling out a ton, just in clumps. It was bad. I had throat discomfort. So even though I already talked about this following issue, but I also had this feeling of just like my thyroid being almost on fire. Like it was weird. It was like 2, 3 weeks where I was very aware of my thyroid being where it was in my neck. It was just very pronounced feeling. So I had kind of like a tightness there. I would get a lot of headaches, fatigue. I just felt like, I would sleep, I would wake up, I would be okay. And after just like an hour or two, I would get so fatigued, almost like somebody sucked my energy out of me. So that was really worrisome. And sleep issues. I would wake up so much at night where I just couldn't really get into the deep sleep cycle and I had issues falling asleep. And that happens to me sometimes, but it usually lasts for like a day or two, three, and then it goes away. But this was for weeks. It was really worrisome. And flatulence, I felt like my gut was not digesting, digesting at all. So there was just so many symptoms. And after that endoscopy I did of my throat, I knew it was a structural and it just didn't make sense to me. So I started digging. I started thinking about, well, what could be causing this? Because this is not normal. I know my body. Yes, I've been dealing with chronic disease and psoriasis and different symptoms since I was young, inflammation and such, but nothing like this. So I started to research. I started to reach out to my providers online. One of them who was on the podcast before, Dr. Alexis Jasmine, who is absolutely incredible. I love her. So I spoke to my chiropractor, Dr. Jess, who was also on the podcast in season 1. Started talking about it. And, based on also my research online, I was like, mold. And that's exactly what they were thinking as well. So I was like, oh my God, like where can I have this mold exposure? And then I started to freak out thinking it's in my house. But at that point, some of these symptoms started to disappear. So I knew I was healing. And so I knew it was in my house because typically if you're continuously exposed to mold, these symptoms do not disappear. So I was like, I don't think it's the house. But just in case, I was fortunate enough to be able to get a mold expert in the house. I did an inspection of the house, and luckily he confirmed there is no mold in this house. So I was like, thank goodness, because I was so worried. Because once you figure out it's something like this, you just don't feel safe in these environments. So it's really scary. But luckily the house was fine, and I was slowly starting to get better. So I thought, okay, this is great. But just to confirm it was mold and nothing else, I did do testing. So I ordered the mycotoxin urine test from Mosaic Diagnostics. And I did do that urine test, which confirmed some high numbers of mold toxicity in my body. So I was like, okay. So it's all starting to make sense. And I knew I needed to work on this. So, what did I do to work on mold toxicity? Usually, when you look online and you look for detoxifying from mold and what can you do to heal, a lot of the literature points you towards detoxing. And I did do a little bit of that. So, I bought like bentonite clay for the bath and Epsom salts and baking soda. But
Truth be told, with a toddler, I just don't have time to take baths. I did it like once or twice. That's really all I did. That really wasn't what helped me. But what I did do is really turn towards nature. So sun exposure, cold exposure in the mornings, because by the time I started to figure out what's going on with me, it was already autumn, so it cooled down. So I was able to go outside with some as much minimal clothing as you could, so without a jacket or without hats and maybe get a t-shirt when it was cold. I would do morning cold exposure this way. I'm very sensitive to cold. It's hard for me to do a cold plunge or a shower. This is how I ended up doing the cold exposure and morning walks. I also did a lot of grounding. I did sunlight exposures, lots of red light and infrared light in the morning, during sunsets, and UVA and UVB exposure. So UVB wasn't very present during the winter, as we know, but cold exposure helps you produce UVB.
I'm a huge believer that light is one of the most powerful medicines for our kids and for us. That's why I love Bon Charge. Their blue light blocking glasses, red light therapy devices, and many other products are designed to support your circadian rhythm and help your family sleep and feel better naturally. In our modern world of screens and artificial light, these small shifts make a big difference. Calmer evenings, deep sleep, better focus, and happier moods. I use Bon Charge products every single day, and even my son has his own pair of blue light blocking glasses for evening story time. You can check out all their products at boncharge.com and use code LENAL to save 15% off your purchase.
I was lucky enough to take advantage of that healing modality. And then, of course, eating lots of animal-based protein, lots of red meat, drinking raw milk, lots of very nutrient-dense foods. And I have healed from all these symptoms. It took a few months. I needed to really reset and take care of my body. But it finally, after about 4 months or 5 months, these symptoms have gone away. But I just feel like it set me back so much because I was just so tired and so sick that I just couldn't focus on anything. I was like, I can't do the podcast right now. Can't really get on social media because this is just a little bit too much. But I'm excited for what's to come because I was very lucky and fortunate that there's no mold in my house. So I'm able to use this environment to heal. But not everybody is as lucky. Some people, unfortunately, are exposed to mold and they're living in a moldy house and they cannot afford to leave. It is so hard to heal when you are in a moldy environment. So my heart goes out to you if that is you right now. One thing I can say is that as much as you can, do like a mold-free vacation. So go stay at a friend's house for a few days or go on a vacation if you can afford it, or go visit your parents or family members, or go camp out outside just to spend some more time in nature and away from the moldy environment. That's going to be very healing to you. And if you are actually wondering, like, hey, is this why my kids are sick for the past um, year or 2 years? And I do hear that a lot. Is this why my kiddo is having these symptoms? Is this why I feel so sick? If you do suspect it, but you don't know, and if you can't afford to have a formal inspection of the house, I would say do the same. Leave the house for 5 days, 7 days, and see if any of these symptoms get better. And then see what happens when you return to your home, if any of them come back. So I have heard, or I was listening to a podcast today, actually, The Cultural Apothecary. I love that podcast with Alex Clark. One of the doctors on there was actually talking about her friend who her daughter was suffering from epilepsy, seizures, right? So she was getting them a lot, but they have gotten a little bit better and they were suspecting mold in the house. Or I think the doctor actually told her, like, I think you have mold in your house. So she left on vacation and I think came back after like 2 weeks. And the child was seizure free, feeling amazing on that vacation, no complications, just being spectacular. And the second they get back to the house, she started having seizures again. So it's very scary. Mold can be very, very detrimental to our health. There's so many ways mold can make things worse for you. Let's talk a little bit about what is mold and why it is really so problematic. So Mold is a type of fungus that thrives in damp and warm environments and just like musty environments. So if you think about very humid places, like I know in Florida, there's a lot of moldy houses because of water getting in and just the constant humidity. And places like that, it can be a real problem. So it reproduces by releasing tiny spores into the air, which can be inhaled or come into contact with our skin. So while not all molds are harmful, because we have fungus everywhere and we actually rely on fungi and on fungus to live. There's a lot of beneficial fungus in our body, which feeds on the bad bacteria and helps us clean up our system. So fungus is really good. However, there are some toxic types of fungus, such as black mold, which is, I did not test the house in California, but this is what I think it was there. There is like things like penicillium. And these types of fungus, they can produce mycotoxins, which are toxic substances that can cause adverse health effects. So when we're exposed to mold, especially over extended periods of time, these mycotoxins can enter our bodies and potentially affect multiple systems, including our breathing, our immune system, and our neurological system. So for me, I had immune system issues, but that makes sense because I already do deal with inflammation and immune health problems, right? Because of the psoriasis and some other problems I have, but also neurological system issues, which for me, it was the vertigo and it was also the swallowing issues. So what makes mold particularly concerning for families is that children may be more vulnerable to its side effects due to their developing immune systems and higher respiratory rates in general relative to their body size. So meaning they can inhale more mold spores proportionally than adults. Luckily, my son didn't have any symptoms of mold exposure. Actually, nobody in my family did. I was the only one. And I attribute that to inflammation that I already had going on in my body. I'm always the person who's so quote unquote healing and working on my health. So I believe I was just more vulnerable to it. So this is why this mold exposure was so detrimental to me. And my family, who have a stronger immune system than me, they just didn't get exposed. Well, they did get exposed, but they didn't have any symptoms. Let's talk about how mold exposure can affect your health, right? So you heard about my symptoms, but those are just symptoms that were particular to me. But mold sensitivity varies widely from person to person. Some individuals might have minimal reactions, while others can develop severe symptoms from the same level of exposure. Common in adults, we can see respiratory issues, so a lot of coughing, wheezing, nasal congestion, and throat irritation. We can see eye irritation, redness, watering, blurry vision, skin problems, rashes or hives, headaches and migraines, fatigue and weakness, cognitive issues, so brain fog, difficulty concentrating, memory problems, joint and muscle pain, digestive problems, sleep disturbances, and then you can see some mood changes, anxiety, depression, irritability. I did forget about one of my symptoms. So when it comes to hives, for the first time in my life, I started to break out in hives. That never happened to me before. So it was actually very scary because I remember I was watching some series with my husband one evening. So it was late. It was like 10 p.m. And all of a sudden I started getting itchy. I was just scratching so much. And I was like, this is weird. At first I didn't think much about it. But then I started feeling more and more itchy. So I turned the light on. I got up and I started examining my body. And I had these huge hives, size of like tennis balls, some of them. They varied in size, but like they were huge on my body. And I was like, oh my God, what is going on? So I started getting really concerned. We started talking about it with my husband. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know, because I didn't know if my throat was going to close. I didn't know what was going on. This never happened to me before. So I got really nervous. My son was sleeping. I didn't want to wake him up to go to the ER, but I was kind of like afraid to drive myself. So we were really, really nervous. But then I took a deep breath. I took an allergy medication and I took homeopathy, Apis mellifica. It's really good for allergies and allergic reactions. So I took a lot of Apis mellifica and I lay down and I was like, okay, taking deep breaths. I went to sleep because I didn't feel like my throat was closing. I was just having hives on my body. So I was like, well, let me see what happens. And yeah, it was very scary. And this happened to me multiple times for the next 3 weeks. I went to an allergist who said, no, this is just a virus. So don't worry about it. She wasn't concerned. I was like, okay, well, this must be mold related. Then I figured that out. So yes, hives can be a very big part of it. Okay, so let's go back to some signs. And here are some potential signs in children. They can have frequent respiratory infections or persistent cold-like symptoms. I've heard of people talk about how their kids who have been exposed to mold, they can be sick almost nonstop for years. It's really scary. They can have new or worsening asthma symptoms. They can have unusual fatigue or lethargy. They can have unexplained rashes. They can have behavioral changes or difficulty concentrating. They can have a lot of headaches and persisting allergic symptoms that don't respond to usual treatments. They can have dark circles under their eyes, odd or new aversions to certain rooms in the house. I just want to emphasize that these symptoms can be easily attributed to many other conditions, right? That's what makes mold toxicity so challenging to identify. If your child has been to multiple doctors for recurring issues with no clear diagnosis, consider whether mold exposure could be a factor, especially if there are signs of mold or water damage in your house. This can be a big issue if this is something that is happening to you. So my heart goes out to you. Here are some signs that there could be mold in your house. How do you know? Remember, mold isn't always visible. It can hide behind walls. It can hide behind wallpapers. It can hide under carpet. It can hide underneath the house in the crawl space. It could be in many different hidden spaces. But here are some warning signs to watch for. So you can have visible mold growth, which can appear as black, white, green, or even orange spots. You could have persistent musty or earthy odors, especially in humid areas. You can have water damage. That includes water stains on walls or ceilings. You can have peeling or bubbling paint or wallpaper. You can have excessive humidity or condensation on windows, pipes, or walls. You can have recent flooding or leaks that weren't properly dried, and respiratory symptoms that improve when you're away from home, or just symptoms that improve when you're away. So if you notice any of these signs, it's really worth investigating further, especially if family members are expecting unexplained health issues. One more thing I wanted to say about just the vulnerable populations. Really, anyone can be affected by mold exposure, but these groups are more vulnerable. Infants and young children, just because their bodies are still developing, they haven't been exposed to as many environments as us, so they can be particularly vulnerable. Elderly individuals as well. People with existing respiratory conditions like asthma or COPD, those with compromised immune systems like me and many other people, because we live in such a toxic world right now, individuals with genetic predispositions that affect the detoxification pathways, or without genetic predispositions, people who have a hard time detoxing, and pregnant women. If you or your child fall into any of these categories, just be vigilant about potential mold exposure, because it's really important to check. Now, how do you check for mold? If you suspect mold in your house, there are several testing options. You can kind of do like a DIY mold test kits. There are limitations to that. They're not always accurate. All of us have mold in our house because, like I said, it's a living organism. It's just some mold is toxic, some mold is not. So we constantly have mold outside that comes in the house and grows in the house because of these environments. Like, for example, inside your toilet bowl, there could be mold there, in your dishwasher, in your washer, because those places are humid. They're not exposed to sunlight. Because of that, there's potential for mold growth. Definitely recommend you check there. You can do these test kits, but like I said, they come with limitations because there is mold anyway, so they're going to pick up every mold. But you can send those out to a laboratory. That's what I did, and they can tell you what types of molds are in the house. So it's good to know. However, they're not the best option. You can have air quality monitors that detect mold spores. Those can be helpful, and you can have moisture meters. So those can identify potential problem areas. So those are really great. I bought very small humidity monitors that I set up in the house just to see how much moisture is in the house, because you're not really supposed to have anything over 60 in terms of moisture. It's better to have it around 50. That is really good to monitor. Another thing you can do is hire a certified mold inspector. This is what I did. There was a person in our area who does it. There are multiples, but he comes highly recommended. He's really great, a really great mold expert. I had him come out and inspect the house. He did teach me about, what to do to prevent mold buildup in your dishwasher and your washing machine and how to clean it out. So for the washing machine, you want to make sure the door to your washer is open after washing. So there's moisture because you just ran the washer through. Keep the door open so that that moisture can dry out, and also pull out the tray where you put in the detergent. Pull it out, inspect it, see if there's mold in it. I had mold in mine because we're constantly putting liquid in it and then we're closing it. So that's a potential area for mold growth. Just keep that open, especially after you used the washer, until it dries out. He looked at moisture levels. I was concerned with my master bathroom, and I was so nervous, actually. I closed up the shower area and I made us shower in a different bathroom, which I was so lucky to have that opportunity. But luckily he checked and there's no mold there. So I'm so glad. But yes, so a mold inspector is somebody you can hire. You can do some air sampling tests, which is also what I did. I sent it out to the lab and it did come back positive for some mold, but you kind of look at the amount of mold that it comes back positive for, and then the types of molds. There wasn't anything too concerning in mine, so that was exciting. Surface sampling, you can do bulk material sampling, and then you can do the ERMI. So this is a very popular one. This is the Environmental Relative Moldiness Index testing. I didn't do this one, so I don't really know too much about it, but this is something you can look into as well. Now, for medical testing to see if you have a mold issue in your body, if you have mycotoxin buildup, if you suspect anything, there are some tests your healthcare provider might consider. That for me, this is what I did. I did the mycotoxin testing through my urine. I used Mosaic Diagnostics for that, which did show me that I did have mycotoxin exposure. You can look at your inflammatory markers. You can do some immune system function tests. You can do some genetic testing for susceptibility genes like HLA-DR. And then you can do a specialized neurological assessment. But it's worth noting that not all conventional doctors are well-versed in identifying and treating mold illness. You might need to seek out a healthcare provider who specializes in environmental medicine or integrative approaches. As we wrap up today's episode, I just want to leave you with a few key takeaways. When it comes to mold and really any health issues that you have, again, trust your instincts. If you or your children are experiencing persistent unexplained symptoms, and conventional treatments aren't helping, please consider environmental factors like mold. And be proactive about inspecting your home, especially after water damage or in naturally damp areas like your dishwasher and washer and your ice dispenser in your fridge. These types of areas are very frequently damp, so please inspect them thoroughly. Remember that not all healthcare providers are familiar with mold-related illness. If you suspect mold toxicity, seek out practitioners who have experience in this area. Taking swift action at the first signs of water damage can prevent a cascade of health problems down the road. If you see any water damage signs in your house, act quickly. Dry that area out. Take out what you need so you do not have this mold buildup because of how scary and toxic it can be. And most importantly, know that if you are suffering from mold-related illness, recovery is possible with proper treatment and removals from exposure. So this is key. If you do think you are in a moldy environment, if you can, please leave. And if not, seal off the area that has been exposed to mold. Perhaps try and stay with some relatives as much as you can, but just remember your body is resilient and you are capable of healing. My journey with mold illness has been challenging, but it's also given me a deep appreciation for the importance of a healthy home environment. I hope that by sharing my experience, I can help other families avoid similar struggles or find their way to answer if they're already experiencing unexplained health symptoms. But one more thing I wanted to mention, though, as we wrap up today, is that I'm not a physician and this podcast isn't meant to replace medical advice. So if you suspect mold exposure or are experiencing concerning symptoms, please consult with a healthcare provider. That said, I've done extensive research and consulted with experts to bring you reliable information, and I really hope it was helpful today. So thank you for joining me on the Livin'Sky podcast. If you found this information helpful, please share it with others who might benefit. And if you have questions or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, reach out to us at info@linalivin'Sky.com. And I'm so excited to be back here with you. So until next time, this is Lena reminding you to stay vigilant about your family's health and the environments they live in. Take care. Till next time.
Thank you so much for tuning in today and being a part of the Livin'Sky community. I hope you learned something new and inspiring that you can apply in your life right away. If you have a minute, please leave us a 5-star review. It really helps us grow and for other parents like you to find us. If you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you listen to your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Sending you and your family lots of love. I'll catch you in the next episode. Thanks so much for listening to the Livin'Sky podcast. If this episode resonated, please leave a quick 5-star review or share it with another parent who'd love it too. It really helps more families find the support that they need. And don't forget to join my newsletter at linalivin'Sky.com for more tips and free guides. Sending a little sunshine to your kitchen today. See you next time.